The day I married the love of my life should have been the happiest moment of my existence, but instead, it became a harsh reminder of where I truly stood with my family. They weren't there. Not because of an emergency or an unavoidable circumstancino, they chose not to come. And the reason? My sister's infidelity. My older sister, Clara, had always been the golden child, the one my parents adored and spoiled endlessly. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one expected to be independent, to handle things on my own. So when Clara's marriage crumbled right before my wedding, my parents did what they always did. They rushed to her defense, regardless of the truth. The scandal erupted just a week before my big day. Clara's husband, Daniel, had always been a quiet, reserved man, but when he found the incriminating messages on her phone, he didn't hold back. She had been having an emotional affair with one of his closest friends, exchanging flirtatious messages and planning secret meetings. Though she swore nothing physical had happened, the intent was there. And to Daniel, that was enough. He walked out, filed for divorce, and suddenly, my parents were in full crisis mode, not for Daniel, but for Clara. Her world was falling apart, they claimed. The shame, the heartbreak, the pain. How could she possibly attend a wedding in the middle of her suffering? How could I be so heartless as to go through with it? I was stunned when they came to me with their demand. Postpone the wedding for a year. A whole year. As if my life, my happiness, my love story could be put on hold indefinitely to cater to my sister's mistakes. Of course I refused. My fiancé Ethan and I had spent months planning every detail. Deposits had been paid, guests had RSVP'd, and more than anything, we were ready to start our life together. I wasn't going to let Clara's actions dictate my future. That's when the threats started. My parents, in their usual manipulative fashion, told me they wouldn't come if I didn't reschedule. They made it clear that, to them, Clara's comfort was more important than my happiness. I didn't flinch. I told them that while I would have loved to see them there, I wasn't about to beg for their presence. And just like that, they turned their backs on me. What they didn't know, what I had purposefully never told them, was that Ethan came from a family of immense wealth. His parents owned Utica Pharmaceuticals, a well-known and successful company, and he was deeply involved in the business. I had never mentioned this to my family because I knew exactly how they would react. My parents owned a struggling hardware store, barely making ends meet. And whenever they encountered someone with money, they became shameless fawning over them, trying to form connections, always angling for some financial gain. I had witnessed it too many times to let them do the same to my in-laws. So, for years, I let them believe Ethan was just a regular guy with a decent job. I downplayed everything about his background, never letting on just how different our financial situations were. And because they weren't at my wedding, they never got to meet his family properly. That should have been the end of it. But fate had other plans. Photos from our wedding started circulating online, and someone from Ethan's family posted a beautiful album on the official Utica Pharmaceuticals social media page. The moment my parents saw it, everything changed. That night, my phone exploded with messages. They were furious. They accused me of lying, of tricking them, of keeping them from an amazing networking opportunity. According to them, if they had known Ethan's true background, they never would have missed the wedding. Not because they cared about me, not because they regretted abandoning their daughter on one of the most important days of her life. No, they were angry because they had missed their chance to schmooze with powerful people. At that moment, I knew I had made the right decision by keeping them in the dark. But the nightmare wasn't over. 2 days later, they showed up at my house, unannounced and demanding answers. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. My parents had always been persistent when they wanted something, and now that they realized just how much they had lost by skipping my wedding, they were determined to guilt-trip me into submission. When they arrived at my house unannounced, my husband and I exchanged a knowing glance. We could have ignored them, but we decided to let them in if only to put an end to this once and for all. From the moment they stepped inside, my mother wasted no time launching into her speech. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed, clutching her chest as if I had physically wounded her. "You humiliated us. You tricked us. If we had known who Ethan's family was, we would have come to the wedding. How could you keep something so important from your own parents?" I sighed, already exhausted. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," I said, crossing my arms. "Because I knew you would make this about yourselves." My father, who had been silently fuming, finally exploded. "You robbed us of an opportunity. Do you have any idea how much it would have helped us to connect with people like that? Our business could have finally grown, but you made sure we missed out." And there it was. The truth laid bare. "So you're not actually upset that you missed my wedding?" I said slowly, my voice laced with disbelief. "You're upset that you missed a chance to use my in-laws for your own benefit?" My mother gasped, as if I had just said something outrageous. "That's not true. We just wanted to support you, but you lied to us. You betrayed us." "No, you betrayed me a long time ago." I cut her off. "You made it clear that I would always come second to Clara. You chose her over me, even though she was the one who ruined her own marriage. You were willing to miss my wedding just to coddle her, and now you have the nerve to come here and act like I am the one who hurt you?" The room was thick with silence. My father's face turned red, but he had no response. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I don't owe you anything," I said firmly. "Not my loyalty, not my time, and certainly not my in-laws' money or connections. You made your choice when you abandoned me on my wedding day. Now you have to live with it." That was when my mother turned to Ethan. "You," she said, her voice shaking with barely contained anger. "You should have told us. You let us believe you were just some middle-class worker. Why would you do that? Don't you see how unfair this is?" Ethan had been silent up until this point, simply standing by my side with his arm around me. But now he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Mrs. Hayes, your daughter and I made that decision together because we knew exactly how you would react." My mother let out a bitter laugh. "And what? You think you're too good for us now? You think just because you married into money you get to look down on your family?" I took a step forward, my patience completely gone. "No, Mother, but I do get to decide who I allow in my life. And right now, I don't want either of you in it." That was the final straw. My father let out an angry huff, shaking his head. "You'll regret this," he muttered, storming toward the door. My mother followed, pausing only to throw one last dagger my way. "You've always been ashamed of us. That's why you kept your new family a secret. You think you're better than us, but you're not. And one day, when you realize that, don't bother coming back." And with that, they were gone. Ethan wrapped his arms around me as I let out a shaky breath. I knew that, in some ways, my mother was right. This wasn't just about money. I had been distancing myself from them for years because I was tired of feeling like an afterthought, tired of being treated as less important than Clara. But if walking away meant peace, I was more than willing to pay that price. Little did I know, this wasn't the end. My parents weren't done yet. I thought that after our confrontation at my house, my parents would finally get the message. I had made it crystal clear that I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. But instead of backing off, they decided to escalate. A week later, Ethan and I were enjoying a quiet evening when my phone started buzzing non-stop. I ignored it at first, assuming it was spam, but when the notifications kept coming, I finally checked. It was my sister. Clara, who had been completely silent during this entire ordeal, had suddenly decided that she had something to say. The messages started with fake pleasantries. "Hey, can we talk? I know you're mad at Mom and Dad, but I really think we should discuss this. You're tearing this family apart." And then, when I didn't reply, the guilt-tripping began. "Mom has been crying for days because of what you did. Dad says he doesn't even recognize you anymore. They gave you everything, and you just threw them away like they were nothing." I rolled my eyes and tossed my phone onto the couch. What's wrong? Ethan asked, looking up from his laptop. Clara is trying to drag me back in, I muttered. Ethan sighed. You know what she's doing. She ignored you this whole time. And now that your parents realize they can't manipulate you directly, they're using her instead. He was right. My sister had been perfectly content staying out of it until our parents needed her to fight their battle for them. But I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me into apologizing for something I didn't do. I picked up my phone and finally responded. Clara, you cheated on your husband, and our parents chose to side with you instead of coming to my wedding. That was their decision, not mine. If they're unhappy, they have no one to blame but themselves. A minute passed before she responded. Wow, I see how it is. You're just as selfish as I always knew you were. I smirked. Typical. Clara always had a way of turning herself into the victim. You're not the victim here, I replied. None of you are, but I hope you enjoy the mess you created. And then, before she could send another manipulative message, I blocked her. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. And it felt incredible. A final act of desperation. After blocking Clara, I expected the drama to die down. My parents had no way to reach me, my sister was cut off, and Ethan and I were moving forward with our lives. But then, a few weeks later, we received a call that changed everything. It was Ethan's mother. Sweetheart, I hate to bother you, but your parents showed up at our house today. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? They just showed up. No warning, no call. They kept saying they needed to have a family discussion and that this whole situation had gone too far. I felt my stomach twist with anger. I had blocked them, ignored them, and made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with them. So instead of respecting that, they had decided to harass my in-laws? What did they say? I asked. My mother-in-law hesitated. They were trying to get us to convince you to talk to them. They kept saying you were being unfair, that you had turned your back on them, and that you were too proud to admit your mistake. I clenched my jaw. And what did you tell them? Her voice softened. We told them the truth, that we support you completely and that you don't owe them anything, and then we asked them to leave. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. Thank you, I whispered. Of course, sweetheart, she said gently. You don't deserve this kind of treatment. We just wanted you to know what was happening. When I hung up, I turned to Ethan, my heart pounding. They're never going to stop, are they? I murmured. He wrapped his arms around me. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean they get to be in your life. And he was right. I had spent too long trying to make my parents love me the way they loved Clara, but they never would. They only cared about what I could offer them, not about me as a person, and I was done letting them control me. That night, Ethan and I made a decision. We were moving, not just to a new house, but to a new city far away from my parents, far away from their influence, far away from the toxicity that had consumed so much of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Moving was the best decision Ethan and I had ever made. It wasn't just about putting distance between us and my parents, it was about reclaiming our peace. For the first time in my life, I was living without the weight of my family's expectations, without their guilt trips, without their constant attempts to control me. Ethan's parents had been incredibly supportive throughout everything. They even helped us settle into our new home, making sure we had everything we needed. Life finally felt peaceful. But deep down, I knew my parents weren't done yet. I had cut them off, blocked their numbers, and moved away. Yet, somehow, I still expected them to make one last attempt to drag me back in. And they did. It happened about a year after my wedding. Ethan and I had just celebrated our anniversary, and we were starting to talk seriously about expanding our family. I was happier than I had ever been. Then, out of nowhere, I received an email. From unknown sender. Subject: You can't ignore us forever. I felt my stomach twist before I even opened it. It was from my mother. We heard about your anniversary. We also heard that you're thinking about having children soon. I hope, for your sake, that you come to your senses before then. A child needs their grandparents. A family needs to be whole. We are willing to forgive you for what you've done, but you need to stop this nonsense and come back to your family where you belong. I let out a bitter laugh. Even after everything, they still thought they had the power to control me. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't apologizing. They were trying to manipulate me again. I showed Ethan the email. "They'll never change," he said simply. "No," I agreed, "they won't." I didn't respond. I didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, I did the one thing I should have done a long time ago. I deleted the email. And then I blocked the sender. And just like that, the last thread connecting me to them was cut. Looking ahead, it's been nearly a year since I received that email, and I haven't heard from my parents or Clara since. I have no idea where they are, what they're doing, or if they still think about me. And honestly, I don't care. Ethan and I are expecting our first child soon. My in-laws are overjoyed, and I finally have the kind of family I always dreamed of, a family that supports me, respects me, and loves me unconditionally. I used to think that blood meant everything, that no matter how badly my parents treated me, I was obligated to keep them in my life. But I've learned something far more valuable. Family isn't about blood, it's about love. And I have more than enough of that now. Final thoughts. If there's one thing I've taken away from this experience, it's that sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. And I've never been happier. A year had passed since I cut off my parents. Life had never been better. Ethan and I had settled into our new home, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. His parents treated me like their own daughter, and we were preparing to welcome our first child into the world. For the first time in my life, I was living without fear of my family's toxic influence. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, Ethan and I were having dinner when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered, "Hello?" I watched his expression shift from confusion to irritation. "No, she doesn't want to speak to you, and you shouldn't have this number." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who it was. Ethan hung up, exhaling sharply. "That was your father." "How did he get your number?" I whispered. "No idea, but he wants to meet." I scoffed. "Of course he does. Let me guess he's had a sudden change of heart, and now he cares about me?" Ethan hesitated. "Not exactly. He said he wanted to make things right before it was too late." I frowned. "Before it's too late? What does that mean?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not our problem." I nodded, but a small part of me couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Something wasn't right, and I was about to find out exactly what it was. The unexpected revelation. A week later, I received an email from an unknown sender. I almost deleted it without opening it until I saw the subject line. "It's about your parents. Please read." Curiosity got the best of me. Against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The message was short but chilling. "I know you don't want to hear from them, but this isn't about manipulation or guilt. It's about reality. Your father is sick, and he doesn't have much time left." I read it twice, 3 times. My hands were shaking. Could this be another trick? Another desperate attempt to lure me back? I wanted to believe it was, but deep down, something told me it wasn't. Ethan found me staring at my phone, pale and silent. "What's wrong?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "My dad is dying." I sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, staring at the email. My father was sick. He didn't have much time left. For a moment I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no urge to rush to his side. Just a strange emptiness, like I was reading about a stranger. Ethan sat beside me, gently taking my hand. "What do you want to do?" I didn't know. A part of me wondered if I should see him, if I should at least get closure. But another part, the part that remembered all the years of neglect, manipulation, and selfishness, told me not to fall into their trap. I don't know if I care, I admitted. Ethan nodded. Then you don't have to go. You don't owe them anything. But something still nagged at me. So, after hours of debating, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to see my father, but I would go to find out the truth. I needed to hear it from someone who wasn't my family. The truth hurts, but not more than betrayal. The next day, I reached out to an old family friend, Mrs. Caldwell. She had known my parents for decades, and if anyone could tell me what was really going on, it was her. When I met her at a small cafe, she looked at me with a sad smile. I was hoping you'd reach out, dear. I cut straight to the point. Is it true? She nodded. Yes. Your father is sick. Stage 4 cancer. He doesn't have much time left. I swallowed hard. It was real. And my mother, Clara? I asked. Mrs. Caldwell sighed. Your mother is the same. She's still blaming you for everything. She thinks if you just forgive and forget, your family can be whole again. Clara is wrapped up in her own world, pretending she's the victim. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course. Then Mrs. Caldwell hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. She looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. Your parents, they lost everything. My breath caught in my throat. What? They made some bad financial decisions. After they moved in with Clara, they tried to start a new business, but it failed. They sold the hardware store, and now they're barely getting by. I think that's why your mother is so desperate to reconnect. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. So, let me guess. They don't just want forgiveness. They want money. Mrs. Caldwell didn't say anything, but the answer was clear in her eyes. They hadn't changed, not even now. I pushed my chair back, standing up. Thank you for telling me the truth. Are you going to see him? She asked gently. I thought about it for a long moment, then I shook my head. I already said goodbye to them a long time ago. Moving forward for good. That was the last time I ever spoke about my father. He passed away 2 months later. I wasn't there. I didn't attend the funeral. And I didn't regret it. Clara tried reaching out again, sending me messages laced with guilt. Mom is alone now. She needs you. I blocked her. I had spent too many years being the forgotten daughter, the backup plan, the second choice. I refused to spend another second being the savior for people who had never once chosen me. Now I had a new family, a husband who loved me, a child on the way, in-laws who treated me with kindness and respect. I wasn't losing anything by cutting them off. I was finally free. And that was all I had ever wanted.